See if that's switched over. Hi, and welcome to my whiskey den. I'm Glen Karen, and with me today I have Raymond Michael Ramos and Mitch Wettle. They've both been gracious enough to join us on this Sunday afternoon. So what we're going to do, what the show was supposed to be about, was sending out samples of stuff from the Midwest to different people from the country to see what they thought of it from kind of different regions, because each region, you might get acclimatized to some of the stuff you're tasting. So today we're going to start out with Douglas and Todd. It's a bourbon out of Minnesota. It's from the Phillips Distilling Company in collaboration with Panther Distilling. So I'd like to welcome once again Raymond Michael Ramos and Mitch Wettle, the whiskey sommelier, bourbon steward, former cooper, and a current distiller. I'm excited to see what he has to say about a couple of these things.
Great to be on the show, Patrick. I mean, I'm sorry, not Patrick, Mr. Glen Karen.
Yes, thank you. Patrick saw a medical bill and left the show 5 days ago. He just walked off the set, said F this, and all of a sudden I was hired. So I'm happy to be here with you today.
Well, it's awesome to be here with you.
Between you and me, I like you better than him anyway.
Well, many do.
There's an air of professionalism that I think Mr. Karen carries, especially with that suit. It's very, very nice.
It hides a lot of things. Okay, so on this first one, I'll let one of you guys go first because I did taste this and have like a little taste beforehand, and I don't want to. I'll give my comments at the end, basically. So.
Okay. Well, this smells really grain forward, so I'd say it's really young. Probably less than 2 years is my guess. Smells pretty sweet, pretty dusty, so it's probably corn. Tasting note wise, you get, of course, that caramel. Little bit of oak, not a whole lot. It's possible they use smaller barrels. A little bit of cherry cough syrup. And then the finish is, finish isn't too astringent. I really like that. A lot of really young bourbons, whiskeys, things like that, the tannins can take over and make it a little more astringent. That didn't happen in this case. Like, I like the taste actually much more than I like the smell on this one, because the smell to me is just dusty grain. If you've ever been in an old silo or an old barn where they fed lots of animals, but they didn't necessarily go to the poo there, that's kind of what it smells like. But the taste, it's kind of basic, but it's really pleasant. Caramel, hint of oak char, a little bit of cherry. There's a little bit of vegetation hiding in there. I wouldn't go so far as to call it like eucalyptus or tea tree oil or anything like that, but there is a green note that I'm getting. It's pretty pleasant. That's about what I got.
Yeah, I agreed with a little bit of the dusty kind of barn smell, and I couldn't put my finger on that before. Sorry about that, Ray. I didn't mean to jump in on you.
That's all right. I agree a lot with you, Mitch. I think there's a little bit more berries hidden in the nose and leather. It's kind of like sneaky. To me, it's like kind of a background note on the berries. You get a little bit of that baking spice, almost the molasses on the taste. I agree with Mitch. It's a little bit more complex on the nose than it is the taste. It's more straightforward. It's pleasant. It's something. It's kind of like a daily drinker to me, but I do enjoy it, which is, yeah. I think it's a nice little bourbon that if you like more bourbon's on the bitter end.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this one was at 46.5% alcohol by volume. It was 83% short summer corn and 17% red winter wheat. And it was actually 4 years in a barrel, but it's in Minnesota. So from here to Kentucky, that could be quite comparative.
That's probably worth throwing you off. I swear to me, this tasted about 2 years old and probably in a smaller barrel.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, climate changes a whole lot when you're aging. Absolutely.
And on the taste with this one, I got that baking spice little note that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And I do get more of the leather on the nose, like Raymond was talking about with that. But when I first had this, which is always, a problem because you have something a couple months ago and you come back to it. I remember I asked Mitch because it had like a little bit of a rye spice, and I was like, I did not know where that was coming from, and I hadn't had very many wheats that were spicier, like have a little bit of kind of crossover flavor. But I remember being surprised, and I'm like, I don't know where you got that, but since then I understand it a bit more just because I hadn't had any real wheats that were a little spicy. They were all kind of flatter.
Yeah, and I think that subtle barrel in the background on the nose is obviously from the wheat there. It's kind of hidden there. But I really liked it. It was kind of a nice surprise.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was too.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely milder, not nigh as spicy as I was expecting, which wheat makes sense, absolutely. But
welcome, Jeffrey. It's good to see you. Thanks for stopping in.
yeah, what's up, Jeffrey? Yeah, I think that spiciness is just coming from that barrel.
Okay, yeah. That was the other thing they said. The wood came from Minnesota for whatever it was. I don't know if that mattered or not or anything if it comes, but yeah, I could see how that was. I was a little more confused because it got me for a second. I'm like, I'm getting some spice or a little flavor to it that had me lost for a minute. But.
So I'm going to get really nerdy for a second. Minnesota wood actually does make a huge difference.
Really?
Yes. So if you've ever seen a cross section of the tree, they have those tree rings. And tree rings can be, pretty tight or pretty loose, and it depends on the growth season of the tree. The shorter growth season, the colder it is, kind of like it is in Minnesota, the tighter the rings will be. And the dark part of the ring and the light part of the ring actually have different levels of sugars in them. And the light part has a little bit higher level of sugar. So the slower the growing season, the less sugar that's in the wood. So the more spice it'll impart comparatively to a more southern grown oak tree. So Minnesota oak provides spice, kind of like French oak.
Nice. I did not know that. Thank you.
Ta-da. I also talk with my hands. Bum, bum, bum.
It's okay. I was gonna say I do that too if you notice.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll put that one down. Then number 2 on the list of stuff we had was from Yahara Bay. That's a distillery outside of Madison. It's 40%. I was gonna say it's 4 grains, but they wanted to what's wrong with this thing? There we go. Glen was kind of weak there for a second. It was 4 grains. They didn't want to say what they were. I respect that. Hold on, that was the wrong glass. I just used that. Let's move down the line properly. And it's a minimum of 2 years in a Southern oak barrel on this one. I remember when the first time I had this, I thought it was a friendly, approachable bourbon or whiskey to someone who may not have had it, was the way I was thinking of using it. Kind of like the way I was in the past using Basil Hayden. It's not the same flavor profile, but I thought it was kind of light and friendly to most people. But
this nose is unlike any nose I've smelled either before or within recent memory, because there is some funk going on in this nose, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Definitely a lot of rye, I think.
Yeah, I can see rye. I'm just trying. The fact that it's a 4 grain is throwing me off. I'm trying to identify that 4th grain.
Yeah.
The only other thing that could have happened is Patrick, before he left the show, could have switched 2 and 3 around, but he doesn't think he did that. It'll be a test.
Oh, whoa, that's very rye on the taste. That is incredibly rye on the taste.
Yep.
Well, then we'll
I'm sorry?
Then we'll keep in mind that maybe 2 and 3 may be inverted, if that's the case.
Okay.
I don't believe but he could have been dumb and screwed that up.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot more butterscotch than caramel. There's a lovely herbaceous note in there. To me, it's tea tree oil. For those of you who do the whole essential oils or aromatherapy type stuff, if you've ever smelled tea tree oil, it's kind of what this tastes like. There's a little bit of peppermint in there, a little bit of dill, all of which are just screaming rye at me.
Oh, yeah. 2 is 3, and 3 is 2.
My bad.
We're on the Driftless Glen Young Rye.
Yeah, you're drinking the Driftless Glen. Sorry, I just tasted some here, and yes, that was definitely a mistake. My apologies, everyone watching. Number 2 was Driftless Glen from Baraboo, Wisconsin. It's their young rye cask strength, 63.3%, aged only 14 months, 75% rye, and the rest is corn and malted barley. Sorry, everyone.
I think it's really good, especially for 14 months old. Once again, the tannins aren't necessarily overpowering it. I get a nice hint of baking spice there from the barrel. Young ryes traditionally perform a little better than young bourbons. If you feel like opening a distillery, you can generally get a rye out before you can get a bourbon out. That's at the very least palatable. A great example of that in Kentucky is Peerless. They started releasing their rye at 2 years, and they just released their bourbon at 4 years. And their rye was great at 2, and their bourbon is great at 4. So I think they made the right choice. But this, it also doesn't taste or smell over 120 proof.
No, that was the thing that I found pretty interesting about that.
Yeah, I think I'm really enjoying the nose because there's a lot going on there. There's a light dill. I get cherry, vanilla, caramel, that spiciness. It's really enjoyable. And then I'm a little disappointed that I don't get some of those notes in the taste. I'm not a big rye fan, but I don't not like this. It's got a nice balance to the flavor profile.
I'm in a similar boat. I'm not typically a huge rye fan. Thing I keep getting on this is the more I go back to it, I was getting more of that the dill flavor in the taste.
Yeah, definitely in the taste. I get just overwhelming dill. Just really, really heavy. More towards the notes that Mitch and his much higher educated palate suggests.
Whatever.
And it's like on the edges. It's like right where Mitch was talking about the tannins. It takes it like right up to the edge of like, oh, and then it lets go. It's like,
yeah. So that's so I'm gonna get real nerdy again. So tannins are the only chemical compound in a tree that are water soluble. So the higher proof you make a whiskey, the less tannin it'll have in it, because just has to have water to have tannins. So I think they made a really smart choice leaving it at that high of a proof because it actually did reduce the astringency that you got out of it.
Now they're doing 2 other like ryes now. They're not doing this one anymore. I know one's pretty high. One's 51 because that's like the name for it. And I think the other one was a little bit more. And I always like higher proof stuff, so I'm never gonna complain with that. But yeah, sorry about flipping those 2 around. That's why I had the one here. Sorry.
That's fine.
I wonder if you guys are getting the same thing. I'm getting like almost a grape seed and citrus notes in there as well.
Flavor or smell?
Flavor and the taste.
I could see the citrus kind of being up at that top part with like what I was saying, right where the tannins almost kind of break. I could see that, like a little lemon in there.
I'm gonna have to be really honest. I don't know what grape seeds taste like, so I'm not gonna be able to find that one.
Well, in my mind, it's Jesus. Now I'm having a problem. It's like just forget whatever I'm saying because I can't describe it accurately, so might as well not even try.
I was like, I don't even know if they have seeds in grapes anymore. I haven't even seen that in a while.
Yeah, I think I accidentally got one not that long ago of a bunch of Costco seeded grapes. I had one and was like, all right, well, I'm done with these. And, I think I threw about 3 pounds of grapes.
Just, if you've ever tasted raw, like wheat grain, add a little bit of light green grape flavor to that wheat grain.
Okay.
And that's similar to what I'm thinking of. Just raw wheat grain, the seed.
Yeah, more at the beginning. I could see that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could see that at the beginning. And then the other stuff kind of takes over on that one. Yeah. I kind of drank a lot of that one. That one was nice.
And the highest proof, right?
No, I don't think it is.
Oh, it's not. Oh, Lord.
So I was asking about what order we should go in. That's why we're just going straight down the line, and whatever happens, happens. So now number 3 is going to be Yahara Base then. That one's going to be the 40% one that I said was a little bit friendlier. As soon as Mitch said something about rye spice, something else, I'm like, that is not. I passed your mistake, and that's why he's not on the damn show anymore.
I just thought Mr. Karen was really hardcore if he thought that was just the really smooth stuff he said.
Well, like I said, he does like the high proof stuff, but I don't know. I mean, I could clearly tell the difference. How about that between the 2?
There is a big difference.
Excuse me.
So this one, I'm getting a lot more candy sweetness. Either probably green Jolly Rancher on the nose, maybe a different Jolly Rancher. Not a huge Jolly Rancher huffer, so it's hard for me to differentiate them.
You weren't a Zima and Jolly Rancher, were you? You didn't do that?
No. I can't say that I was. I'm one of those weird people that didn't drink until I was 21, and Zima was dead when I was 21. So
probably a good thing.
It's kind of rough, right?
I just don't think you should ever have to microwave your liquor with a Jolly Rancher to make it taste better.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So I would say the nose and taste are surprising because there's a note in the nose that I really dislike. And I'm trying to put my finger on it, but I actually like the taste.
Would that be hibiscus?
Have I had this?
No, hibiscus.
Hibiscus. Oh, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, that's kind of what I get on the nose.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, there's definitely floral.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just a little hibiscus note along with that green apple Jolly Rancher. And
That tastes good. That's smooth caramel candy. Hint of green apple, kind of like that green Jolly Rancher. Maybe some citrus, like an orange back there.
Yeah, some notes just dancing around, like little side notes, but
yeah, like
almost
orange.
not there.
Not the flesh of the orange itself, some orange peel, I think.
Yeah.
Kind of leaves, I don't want to say like a lingering feeling in the mouth, but kind of just like a coating, like a residue. That's
And
interesting.
That's what I thought was different. So it wasn't as, I don't want to say, it's obviously not as harsh, and I thought it was a pretty light, friendly whiskey compared to other ones, especially the one I got confused with what we were doing. But I was like, I just thought this is something that you could introduce people who weren't into whiskey. It might be a first step one. Just not overly complex, nice, friendly. Like you said, he goes from, you get the caramel Jolly Rancher kind of thing. So it's a little bit sweeter, but it's not overly sweet, on the taste, and it goes away pretty nice. Where it doesn't leave, like you said, like a really thick taste in your mouth or really woody taste. It's kind of just flows and goes, and what you're left with is almost like an essence of something, not really like an actual like hard flavor like you get sometimes, but just like an essence of what you just had.
Yeah, not a cohesive thing, but it's just that kind of residue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm getting a little more grain now that I kept sipping on it, which is good because if I'm perfectly honest, it was really, really friendly and it could have used a hint of complexity. And that grain is bringing another flavor to the party, which I thought it needed. But yeah, this is very friendly. Pretty short finish. I can't tell if it's because I'm not drinking water because I'm unprepared, but sometimes when I swallow, there's a really interesting flavor / burn in the back of my throat that is that I really like, but I think it's the combination of the fact that of the 3 previous whiskeys that's just kind of.
I haven't had any water either, and the last drink I had just has this like kind of tickle at the back of my throat right now. It's not like intense, but it's like almost wants me to drink more.
Well, I guess since I am drinking water, I'm not having those sensations. So.
Ray. How dare you be prepared and show us all up?
I think I have water. I have water somewhere in here, but
I gotta have an edge on you guys somewhere.
Yeah. We got a little second where we're kind of halfway through stuff. A little question. Well, I'll start with Ray first. Do you remember a whiskey or say an experience that kind of started you in the excitement towards whiskey? Because I know I didn't. I drank a couple things, but not a lot. And then there was like a specific whiskey I had that was like, "Ooh, I'm on the right path, and I'm going this way."
Well, I think I'm Irish Mexican, so I've always more leaned towards alcohol. When I was younger, Jack Daniels, I always had an affinity towards Jack Daniels. And when I decided to take it seriously and really examine, it was Jack Daniels. I mean, I really took my time and really developed a love of Jack Daniels and everything that I discovered through not only the whiskey taste and nose, but Jack Daniels' history really got me excited about the whole whiskey thing. And the more I delve into different whiskeys and everything like that, it makes me fall more in love with the whole process and what's being created. So you get the taste, the nose, everything like that, the artistic expression of its presentation in concert with the historical aspects of what is whiskey and each individual whiskey. It's phenomenal. So I'd have to definitely say Jack Daniels. And I started on this journey probably on a serious level, probably about 6 years ago. And it's definitely deepened over the past several years. But it's amazing as far as what it's added to even my life as a whole.
That's excellent. And Mitch, did you have a whiskey? I mean, you obviously started quite a while ago with being a cooper. That would show that you had interest. I didn't think you just fell into the job like this is where I went. But was there an in particular kind of moment or a specific whiskey that like turned your life?
Yes and no. So my first whiskey was actually Old Crow on the Rocks, which didn't necessarily put me straight down the whiskey path. But it was, I think, $4 at the bar I was at. So I was like, all right, we're going to keep these coming. The first whiskey I had that kind of put me on that path was I got a special-ish edition of Old Forester, and it came with a Glencairn. And I was just like, I'm fancy. I'm drinking whiskey out of this weird-shaped glass. Heck yeah. And I drank it, and I was like, wow, this definitely beats the pants off of Old Crow over ice. So I started drinking different whiskeys like Jack Daniels, Crown Royal, like your really big names out of my super fancy glass that I didn't know was called a Glencairn at the time. And then I got more and more into whiskey, discovered like there's more than just your Jim, Jack, Johnny, and Crown. Started building a bar, and by building a bar, I mean I had a bookshelf that I just kept putting more and more things on. It has developed into that, so might need to slow down a little bit.
It looks like there's some room on the bottom left corner.
So it's kind of organized, and that is my rye and Irish section. So those are the two. Well, sorry, Canadian actually over yonder has the least, but those are my two of my three very underrepresented categories. So there's the most room over there. But it sounds really weird to say like Old Crow and Old Forester set me down my path, but it really was those two that made me start to fall in love with whiskey.
Like Ray, mine was Jack Daniels. When I had one of my friends, whenever we'd go to a show or go do some, we'd have a couple drinks of that, and then I forgot what happened, but there was one time we won something special, and I grabbed a Four Roses single barrel, which in the comparison of the grand scheme of things is not overly exciting, but to when you're just used to Jack and Jim and a couple other things, and you have that, it kind of jumped out and like, oh, this is our specialty whiskey. You know, like we're going to do something fun. It's a big event. We'll have a couple of drinks of this before we leave instead. And from that, obviously, progressed to many other things. But I still have an affinity for the Four Roses single barrel. I like it, but it does have that little bit of tug of nostalgia. I don't know if it would as much with Old Crow, but I do I do get how things start.
Thanks for calling me out like that. That's fine. That's fine.
It's whatever did, and if that's the thing that started it, and like Ray says, you know, all whiskey matters, and that's why. Look where you are today. It's because some dude made Old Crow a long time ago.
There you go.
Well, Mitch, if this helps you feel better about yourself, most great stories have very humble origins, and you can't get much humbler than Old Crow.
Yeah, you raise a good point.
Look where you are now. You're a sommelier. You have a better selection than most liquor stores.
Liquor stores, I disagree with. Bars, though, I go to a lot of bars that I can't find a whiskey I haven't had. Mostly because bars want to cater to everybody, so not necessarily the eccentric whiskey drinker. So you kind of run into some problems there.
It does present an issue when you sometimes travel with other people who are into whiskey. It's like, do we go out to bars or do we just go to 2 liquor stores in Chicago and then buy the bottles we want that are significantly cheaper and go enjoy ourselves and wander around town?
Right.
People give me a hard time because when I go out, I drink draft beer because I don't have a draft system at my house. So every draft beer is something I can't get at my house. Whereas there's a good chance I'll be able to get the whiskey at my house. So they're like, I thought you liked whiskey. I love whiskey. But why would I go out here and pay like $12 for an ounce of this whiskey that I have 3/4 of a bottle sitting on the shelf at home?
Yeah, I have that feeling too. And it's whenever someone wants me to pay like a third or half of a bottle for an ounce, I'm like, no, I'll just go buy a bottle. And I'll enjoy myself for at least a couple weeks instead of like 10 minutes here.
Yep.
But there is something to be said about the atmosphere of a bar, the community and all that stuff, as opposed to like, this is my basement, sitting here at my bar drinking alone in my basement. That says you have a problem. Going to a bar and having fun says, maybe you have a different problem, right?
It could be. All right, I'm gonna steer us back to one more. Next one, number 4 on the list of stuff we had is Rieger's. It's just a whiskey. I have the holiday version, but it's the exact same version that is in their everyday bottle. 46% alcohol by volume. It's a blend of different whiskeys that Dave Pickerel helped create when they first opened. It was light corn whiskey, a straight rye, and a blend of straight bourbon whiskey that were all aged for 4 years. And then they actually added some 15-year-old Oloroso sherry to the mix in that. Another cool thing about them is they're actually opening their new distillery next week on the 12th. It's like a 60,000 foot square facility where everything will be run in-house, and they're going to take their heritage back to when it first started, which was when they were the largest whiskey shipping company in the U.S., which let's pray that all comes back. I could use some whiskey shipping. That would be nice. And they're going to come out with a couple other things now that they have their bigger distillery all up and running. But it was all got from other places, and it is technically a blend of all the different stuff, and that's there.
So did you say there was 15-year-old sherry in here, or they used a 15-year-old sherry barrel? So there's
a technical small amount of 15-year-old sherry, from what I understand.
Okay, awesome. So that reminds me, if nobody's ever heard of that, Basil Hayden's Dark Rye actually has 2.5% port in it. It's not necessarily aged in a port barrel. They just straight up put port in it.
Yep. I remember when that came out and I tasted it and I was like, wow, I thought it was the other way around. I'm like, whew, they must have just poured it out of the barrel and then put the whiskey in. Like, still left a little bit in there if they aged it the other way. And I think you can smell a little bit of the sherry on the nose for sure with this one.
Absolutely. There's like for me it's floral notes. I get like a sweet butter.
I love hearing other people's things because you get to go back and hunt yourself for a second and you're like, damn, I missed that.
Yeah,
but it's in there.
It's really nice. I don't know if it's, I can't say for sure if it's dill or not in the background there. I get some oak. It's really got a beautiful nose.
I really like the nose on this. That being said, I would have guessed it would have been higher than 46% off of the nose.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's almost that light kind of sharp note, thinking that it's something like that. I get that where I was almost playing it to, I guess either a tannin or citrus. But no, let's see.
What I like, along with the like the baking spice, vanilla, and that light dill on the taste, I really love the fact that you get that buttery finish that kind of lingers on a little bit. It's really, really nice. I'm really liking this one.
And I see it. There's some heat besides the spice, but it's only like medium level heat for me. It doesn't push up in a higher end. It kind of fades away, and like you said, you get that butter note again.
Yeah, I really, really dig the fact that it kind of comes full circle and is, I think out of all the ones that we've tried so far, this one is probably the more cohesive as far as the nose and the flavor profile.
So I would say this one took me on the best journey. Like this one definitely starts. I almost expected it to have a super traditional bourbon flavor profile because it started so sweet and caramel for me. And then it went to that lovely rye, spice, dill, slightly peppery note. And then that transformed to me into just that lovely barrel tannin, char, almost coffee chocolate note that sometimes charcoal can provide. And then it finished bourbony again for me in that it got sweet, a little cherry, a little citrusy, and a little dusty. And I really enjoyed that journey. This is the first one so far that I could define just transfer from one flavor to transfer to the next flavor to transfer to the next flavor. And I am a big fan of this one.
I liked how kind of, like you're saying, kind of complex it is, but like you said, it's a nice flow. There's not there's no spiky or no punches coming at you. It's just a nice train ride through Flavor Town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because honestly, I can almost taste all of the stuff in there because there is that lovely bourbon kind of note. I think that finish might be sherry since it's pretty fruity. I definitely get the rye. I don't know if the nose is coming from that, light corn whiskey where it just tastes or smells a little sharp.
Mm-hmm.
But that was awesome. I wish more people would do stuff like that.
Yeah, like that. Like there is that little sharp note at the front of the smell, and then kind of fades away. And it has a nice transition over your tongue too. Not just like over time, but like some of them will be like you get something up front, and then once it hits the middle of your palate and back, you get a totally different flavor going on. That's just like a nice. I don't know. I do really enjoy this one. That's just I'm not gonna lie.
This is definitely a whiskey you can come back to, and I don't see myself getting bored with it. I think the more time spent with it, I think the more you can really, really, really explore what's going on. It's really fantastic.
And it's another one of those things that I almost didn't want to say it beforehand, but once you found out Dave was involved, you're like, it's probably not just going to be an average thing that hits you. Like he's put a little bit of time into it and stuff and thought back then. So that's neat. And Mitch, if you had time to create your own whiskey, what grains would you use in yours?
So I am a really big bourbon guy. I live in Kentucky. Bourbon was my first love, even if you slightly discounting Old Crow. So what I would really love to do is do a really high malt bourbon, because I've only really ever had one bourbon that had malted barley as its second most prominent grain rather than as just its third. And I thought it provided an amazing mouthfeel. It definitely increased the oils. It made it more viscous. You can toast the barley all the way from just your regular distiller's barley, which is not toasted at all. They just heated it up barely enough to stop the malting process, all the way to chocolate barley, which is malted to the point that it looks as dark brown as chocolate. You can get all these super amazing complex flavors in there because you're creating this Maillard reaction within your grains. And I don't think that's explored very well in any form, including Scotch. Like, if the only Scotch that I know that I have that really explores toasting your barley past distillers is the Glenmorangie Signet, which does chocolate malts. I know Corsair, I think their Outrage or one of their other ones uses chocolate malts. Rabbit Hole Bourbon uses honey toasted malt, so that's toasted to almost the color of number 2/number 3. And it really does honestly provide this amazing, interesting flavor that not enough people are jumping behind. The problem is it reduces alcohol yield to create that flavor. So people just
don't look to it.
Don't want to do it, because why would you do something that is experimental that'll also cut your profit margin by a substantial amount? So I would create a bourbon where malted barley was the second most popular grain. Probably use rye about 10 to 7%, just to provide a little bit of spice, because I think corn provides that lovely sweetness, rye provides that lovely spiciness, but I think malted barley can provide a range of flavors that people are not taking advantage of.
That's excellent. That was one of the things I was thinking of, because you rarely ever hear of anyone doing that. I was going to ask you about kind of toasting some of that stuff, because I haven't heard of too many people doing that here in the U.S. Like maybe a few, like you said, kind of overseas, but not a ton here. It's pretty rare. So, right.
Corsair is a very experimental craft distillery. It used to be here in Kentucky. They moved to Nashville, Tennessee. I mean, I think I have one of like a 9-grain bourbon from them. I have a quinoa whiskey, an oat whiskey. They're not afraid to experiment, and I really like that about them. I don't like that they left Kentucky, being a Kentucky resident. But that's the type of stuff I enjoy now. Like, I've had a lot of whiskey. Now I want whiskey that I've never had before.
Or someone's daring enough to try something that hasn't been done, or no. That's excellent. And Raymond, I know where you are out on the East Coast. Do you have any local distilleries that you find interesting?
Actually, yes. There is a small distillery, Milk Street Distillery. It's located in Branchville, New Jersey. If you're in the area, definitely check it out. They've been in production about 2.5 years. Well, I shouldn't say production. They've been open to the public for about 2.5 years. Their first bourbon they produced a gold medal. They recently started an experiment with smoking their corn with cherry wood. And I had the opportunity to have the new make, and you'd swear you're drinking liquid. It's incredible, and I can't wait to see the finished product after it's finished aging. But it's a small distillery owned by 2 brothers that were in the construction field and got tired of breaking their back for a living, and decided to go into distilling, and they're just making big moves here in New Jersey, and hopefully they'll be grown up enough in the next couple of years to get some bottles out to you guys.
It's always good to see that kind of risk reward ratio, like Mitch was saying. If you're willing to gamble, you're not always going to hit, but I would think when you do, it's going to be a hell of hell of an explosion. At least I would think so. Gets me
What I
excited.
appreciate about these brothers, what I appreciate about these brothers, and talking with them, they really didn't have any clue what they were doing when they first started. They were like, "Hey, let's just do this." Okay, and so their thought process isn't something of a geek. It isn't someone that's studied the lineage and history of how you make whiskey and what you do. Their thought process is of a hardworking construction worker. What's going to be efficient? What's going to get the job done? What's going to make it aesthetically pleasing, as well as what's going to just make you happy in the simplest forms. And their mind isn't limited by the average. And so I really appreciate what they're doing. They've worked with a lot of smaller barrels. They have a couple of big barrels. I just love where they're coming from, and I love. I know sometimes it's like you take an artist, and sometimes what started out as a beautiful free mind goes through a college education, and sometimes that can hinder your artwork because you're now being held by the standard that you learned in school, as opposed to being free thinking. That can happen sometimes, and I think that can happen in any art form, including distilling. And I don't think
structure.
I don't think these guys are bound by tradition and what you're supposed to do. And so it's a really really beautiful thing, and I can't wait to see what they're coming up with.
I'm excited to see what they have to do myself. That's pretty sweet. All right, I'm gonna steer us to number 5, the last one in the list, and that's from J. Henry and Sons. They are a farm just outside of Madison, once again, kind of in the city of Dane. Now, what I like about this is that it is a 7-year-old cast strength, and there's just not many things out there that, in craft speaking, that are 7, 8 years old. So I always get excited when you're kind of pushing an upper age limit that you haven't gotten to do before. It is 60% alcohol, or 60.46. It is grown with Wisconsin red grain corn, which sounds kind of goofy when I say that, but UW-Madison developed the red corn back in 1938, and they actually had to get the okay from UW-Madison to grow the corn that they're using. So that was another thing that, as far as like when you're doing local and everything, like most of these ones are, except for J. Rieger. I was going to say it really is kind of compact. They don't make their barley, but a different farm in Chilton does, and that's where they get that. So it's all within the state.
That's awesome. Here in Kentucky, every once in a while, you'll have someone who's trying to do an all Kentucky release, and barley is always the biggest problem, just because it doesn't grow super well down here in the South. So I do have to say something really quick about this one. I have to do a major shout out to Peter Schumacher, who's a fellow sommelier. He introduced me to J. Henry and Sons, or J. Henry, a year and a half ago, and I've kind of been a fan ever since. They don't have great distribution in Kentucky, if any. So that's one of the things I always look forward to when I go down to sommelier school. If he's there, I know he's probably going to bring a bottle of this, so I'm pretty pumped.
Odd question. Did he bring the Bellefontaine with him when you tasted it? Because that's the 5-year where they release it or they age it in cognac barrels, and Nancy Fraley kind of collaborated with him on that.
I don't think he did. I think he just brought the traditional straight bourbon.
I like that one a little bit more, just because I don't know why. It was a little different flavor, and it's a little bit lighter than kind of what you're having here. But on the nose, you can definitely tell it's got some higher proof stuff in it right away.
Oh yeah.
That's right in there. I probably shouldn't be sniffing that close, but I like to get in there. I'm getting the kind of the caramel, a little bit of vanilla, a little bit heavier wood note in this one. Not a little bit lighter, but not. Yeah, like a really light citrus note, but not a lot in that. Sorry, I didn't mean to go first on that one. Sorry, I mean jumped the tide on the last one. Sorry about that, guys.
Well, Mr. Glenn, you might have to bring Patrick back.
Glenn just gets excited before drinks in.
I think everybody does, right? So this one, I think it was the last one or the one before, I was talking about how the barrel note was heading towards coffee and chocolate. This one, I absolutely get chocolate-covered coffee beans on from it being in the barrel for those 7 years.
That's awesome.
Sorry. I got really excited about that.
No, I mean, go right ahead with the taste and stuff.
Tasting note before I really had any others ready. My bad.
There's nothing wrong with the excited note, like, hey, I like this inside here.
I could go a lot of ways with that one, Mr. Glenn.
Leave things open-ended. Yeah, I totally get that kind of dark chocolate coffee bean kind of roast. It's almost like a roast more than a. That's one other. We'll finish this, but I got a question about toasting, because I almost think, I don't know if that's more the barrel being toasted, or I guess I was intrigued as to how they got to that flavor. If it was like a more of a toasted barrel than like a superchar that gives you kind of that smell in here. Sorry.
Well, I'll go ahead and answer that. It's not the toast. So kind of scientific, but not too bad. Top 3 percentage-wise compounds in oak are cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin. And they are all 3 combined together. Like the lignin holds the hemicellulose and cellulose together. Cellulose doesn't do anything for the flavor profile. It exists basically as structure. If everything could be dissolved into alcohol and water, the barrel would turn to goo after a few years. So you need something that doesn't react with alcohol and water. They do break down with heat. So if you toast it, you separate the lignins, the hemicellulose, and the cellulose, and it creates a lot more available sugars and various other compounds. However, when you char, you destroy those sugars and you turn them into charcoal. I've found that charcoal is what gives me that chocolatey coffee flavor, but I've not had it in very many whiskeys. The one that I get it the most out of is probably Balcones Rye, which out of Texas, it's 2-ish years old. They char their barrels. So I think it might actually have something to do with heat mixing with charcoal. That's pure speculation, though, about the heat and charcoal parts.
We'll take it as fact.
Sure, sounds good to me.
No, but
I have to say this whiskey excites me a whole lot. I'm not getting what you guys are getting. I'm getting a whole lot in this. The nose, I mean, to me, it's kind of a straightforward nose, but the taste is what I'm surprised by. I get like almost like a burnt caramel. I get like a meaty bacon-like note in there with vanilla, some of that spiciness, and a little bit of peppermint. It's incredible for me on the plate. And the more I spend, if I sip on it, keep it in my mouth for that split second, then I get those chocolate notes. But primarily, It's all those other notes. This has got a lot of things going on, and I really, really dig it on which I didn't expect from the nose, because nose I got some barrel spice, I got a little bit of dill, floral, maybe a little licorice, but then tasting it, it was just a completely different experience. I did
Well,
add a
seeing this,
little, and
go ahead, sorry.
separated those out.
I would say the
I just,
smell is a little bit flatter too compared to the actual taste.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, based
Uh,
off
what,
the smell, I wasn't super excited about the whiskey, but it's really good. I almost wish it wasn't the fifth whiskey, but I understand why it was, because 5 whiskeys in, your palate and nose aren't going to be quite as fresh. But even 5 whiskeys in, it's amazing.
Yeah,
that was
it's
cool. It was. I thought I might be able to fight through the flavor a bit, and I wasn't getting the mint until you started saying that, and now I am on the taste. Like right on the edge of everything, the outside edge. It's almost like there's like an oily barrier, and that stuff is on the outside of it.
I'm super impressed with this. This is by far my favorite out of the 5.
Definitely more aggressive than the one before. It and the Driftless Glen, as far as being aggressive at you, being both cast strength, were accurate, but even at 60, I don't find that to be intolerable. You know, like there's some other ones I've had that are 50 where you're like, holy no, that's way too acetone, way too astringency. Um, so I didn't think it was that bad heat wise for being 60%. I mean, you can tell it was. You knew it was going in. Like there wasn't like, oh, this is a hidden nose. You knew what was going on. But
Absolutely. The Driftless one definitely surprised me with how well they toned the alcohol down at that high of a proof. I forget which one it was that surprised me with how sharp the nose was at that proof. But this one is a really solid representation of how much alcohol you get at cask strength. It fights you. It almost wants you to cry uncle, but then it just brings along so much flavor that you really don't care. Like you're like, yes, this is exactly what I was looking for in a cask strength whiskey.
mm-hmm.
And I like
What's
that mint note, because one of my biggest qualms with Daniel and Rex of the Whiskey Vault is that they say Lagavulin 16 has a mint note, and I would argue that that is a mint note, and Lagavulin 16 is a pepper note, and they are pulling that out of their hind ends, and I will fight about that till the day I die.
Now I feel like I have to get some Lagavulin, and we'll have to try this again.
It's possible.
Well, I think the Lagavulin does have a mint note, but it's it's just really, really subtle comparatively. This is more pronounced. This is more. But the beautiful thing that I like about this is, like I said, I added just a little bit of water, and all those notes are still there. They're just rounded. They're not as sharp, but you still get all that complexity. It's just super, super impressive. I
Well,
also have problems with Rex and Daniel, but it's over tobacco notes, not necessarily mint notes.
and that's this is one that I was excited about because, like I said, you don't get stuff that's like 7, 8, 10 years old from a lot of the distilleries. So once they start producing it, you want it to be quality. You know, you don't want it to be like, oh, here, this is like a 10-year and it's okay. I thought this stood up for at least what it was. You know, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I absolutely love this, especially for what it is. I don't think there are a lot of craft distillers that put out something this good right now, and my hat is completely off to them. They did an amazing job.
the next time around, I do have the Bella Fontaine, and that's supposed to be in the next batch of sample send-outs. So that'll be the next one heading out, because it'll be. I find that when it's obviously not as overpowering as this one is. It's more where we were saying Jay Rieger is a flow down the path. It's more down that. It is still a little challenging, but not really. It's more of a nice stroll. Mm. Mm. Yeah, sorry, I went right back to that.
That's the first one that I had to finish because I was trying to keep my palate vaguely fresh, but I was like, I don't care anymore. I want to finish that one.
Yeah, just get into that. Oh, excuse me, didn't mean to do that. And Raymond, you mentioned before about having qualms over cigars or tobacco notes. Couple quick questions, because I know you have some background in that. Are you a fat cigar or a long cigar person? I just recently found that there was some serious issue with that between a couple of my friends. And Mitch, if you have comments too, I know you smoke cigars too, and you age them in whiskey, so you have a little more background than I do too.
Much like my whiskey preferences, it's the same with cigars. I like a little bit of everything. But to address the Rex and Daniel comments, mainly over the pipe tobacco notes, I find that cigars are like bourbon, meaning that it's there's less that you can do with it as far as the flavor profiles and everything like that. And pipe tobacco is like Scotch. There's a broader range of flavor profiles that you can get. So, and there's a lot within that. So I just wish that they would be a little bit more expressive as far as what pipe tobacco that they're referring to, not just aromatic, because everything has an aroma. But in cigars, every shape, size, leaf blend, every seed that the tobacco comes from, it all carries with it a variety of flavor profile and can affect the way that it smokes as well as burns. So depending on my mood is really what I go for in a cigar. Sometimes I want a short, stubby torpedo, and other times I want something like what's called the Woody by Oscar. It's a 21-inch, I think 80 gauge cigar.
Is that the one Milton Berle used to use?
Less of a man just here.
Yeah,
I know. I'm feeling small.
Yeah, the last one I had, I smoked it in like 3.5 hours. I was like twitching and everything after I finished.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I love all of them. I mean, but definitely it pays to know what you're into, and you only get that through time and just trying different things. Because like I said, they all have a different experience if you pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree. Sorry. It's for me, cigars preference-wise, I'm a really big dude. I'm 6.5 feet tall. I've got kind of big hands compared to like your average 5'10" guy. I like a little bit fatter cigars just because they fit better in my hand. That's really my only thing that I feel like about cigars. That being said, the longer a cigar, the more nicotine you get at the end. And I'm not an avid cigar smoker is probably the best way to put that. I enjoy a cigar every once in a while, especially with my whiskey. So I can definitely get those shakes that Raymond's talking about. I feel a little big, then nowhere near the 2180 gauge. Like if I smoke one strong Churchill, I'll be like, hey guys, I can't smoke anything else for the rest of the day. So I kind of like the Robusto size is pretty good for me, which is around the 50, 40 some ring gauge, 5 to 6 inches. That way, I'm sorry.
One thing I was going to mention, you mentioned a Churchill. One thing about longer cigars is you have a a greater opportunity to experience what the tobacco has to offer. So the flavor profile in cigars, you hear the professionals refer to it as like thirds. The flavor profile in each third. And each third, the deeper you get into the cigar, is a lot like the further you get into the bottle of a whiskey. So as the whiskey oxidizes, it subtly changes the profile. Oftentimes you get more depth and a lot more things open up. Well, the same thing goes for cigars. The deeper you go into it, you're pulling all those original flavors all in, and they're settling in the further you go into them. So the longer the longer your cigar, the more subtle and the more those notes open up. The shorter the cigar, I mean, it's going to be a lot more direct, and you're going to miss some things, in my experience.
Which that might be saying something, since I like bourbon, and it's, bourbon people generally traditionally say isn't as nuanced as Scotch. Short cigars might not be as nuanced as Churchill's or Lanceros, but it's one of those things. I like really strong flavors in my whiskey. I like really strong flavors in my cigar. And if you try to combine strong with weak, one of them's going to get overpowered, and you're not going to have as great of an experience.
Yeah,
but to each their own.
Yeah, like everything. I mean, everything is subjective, but ultimately it comes down to two things: experience and being around other experienced people, because you're always going to play off of each other and learn different things, and grow. And no matter what it is, whether it's a Connecticut style cigar, short, fat, whatever, or if it's a bourbon or a Scotch, the more experience you have and the more time you spend around with others that are into the same things, that experience is going to grow, that knowledge is going to grow, that appreciation is going to grow, and it's something that you can carry on to others that you hang around with that aren't as experienced.
Well, and I think you kind of hit on something there, as when you're with people, is that you get kind of connectivity with them, or I don't want to say a camaraderie, but you get like an understanding, or kind of levels out a little bit.
Whiskey and cigars, to me, are the great equalizers, because you can have people coming from all kinds of different backgrounds. You put a glass of whiskey or a cigar in front of them, and all of a sudden it's on the same playing field. You can have the same experience and share a great moment despite your background or your the pay scale that you live your life. And it's really a beautiful, special thing. And I for one am very grateful to be a part of both communities.
Well, no, I was just going to hit on that and ask. We'll start with Mitch. How has the whiskey community kind of enriched and kind of changed your life since you've gotten into it a little bit deeper?
So, how do I put this? It's really hard to make friends as an adult. Like when I was in first grade, you could just go up to someone and be like, I like swinging. And they'd be like, me too. And I'm still friends with that guy. Like, it's absolutely amazing how that works. As an adult, I like whiskey. Me too. Great. All right. Now you're still friends with that guy. It's kind of funny, but that's really what I use it for. It's kind of like how Raymond said, it's the great equalizer. It's an amazing common ground to talk with about people. Because you've got the people that are, whiskey enthusiasts, and it's amazing to have super nerdy, in-depth conversations with them. That goes all the way down to people who are really new to this thing, who are like, yeah, I kind of think this is amazing. Let's do it together. And you're like, wow, I kind of think this is amazing. Let's do this together. It creates an amazing common ground between people. And it also lets you know people's personalities, because people's real personalities come out with about 3 or 4 whiskeys in. And they're absolutely amazing, 3 or 4 whiskeys in, and suddenly they're just, how do I put it? They're not as amazing. They're rude. They don't shut up. They just talk about things you don't want to talk about. You're like, oh, now I know. And it only took me, 2 hours over 4 drinks that I don't want to be your friend, instead of, like a couple months occasionally hanging out and like watching a basketball game together or something.
Mitch is eliminating friends this way. Like,
I really am. Like,
two hours in, like, you haven't met the checklist.
That's the best way to find out who your real friends are. Go to the bar, get pretty buzzed to the point where you're going to like Uber home or something like that, and see how they behave. If they act the fool, don't be their friend.
Hey, if you rewind time for me, we all have that friend who was like, when we went out, you're like, he's going to be an asshole or a dick to someone by about 11:30, and that means we should just leave him someplace. Or I'm going to a different bar at about the time he starts to be a huge dick. I was like, oh no, he was an ass to the bartender. I'm leaving. You guys stay here. Come meet me at this other bar in like 2 hours. He's not gonna make
it. Right? That's people's personalities, and you learn. His personality doesn't mesh with mine. Their personality does, and that's really what friendship is, right? You find the common ground, and then you find out whether your personalities mesh. And that's my favorite thing about whiskey. It introduces you to a whole bunch of different people, and you pretty quickly learn whether or not they're going to be like an amazing friend, a solid acquaintance, or just someone that when you see at a bar, you're either going to sit at the opposite side or leave.
I like came in. I'll take my check, please.
Just come in and be like, "Sup, bud? You have a nice night," and then you just walk out.
Well, and with you, Ray, I was gonna say, how has the whiskey community kind of enriched your life since you've delved deeper into it, probably a little more recently?
Well, primarily, I've always kind of been a lone wolf kind of guy, and that's a byproduct of just how I've lived my life mainly, and without going too deep on that. But most of the time I've been super busy, especially when I was younger. At one point I had 2 full-time jobs and a part-time job at the same time.
You're not seeing anybody then.
Yeah, and it's so I've primarily been just on my own, exploring everything. I do have to give the Whiskey Vault, Rex and Daniel, huge shout outs. Because getting involved in them, watching everything going on, especially in the early days, it allowed me to be the weirdo that I am with a bunch of other people that are just as weird as me. Well, maybe not as weird as me, but
compatible weirdness.
Yeah, compatible weirdness.
Compatible weirdness, and it created this environment to where I don't want to say accepted, but welcomed and celebrated. I made the huge mistake of letting an alter ego out in that community called the Whiskey Mariachi, and I have no name anymore. It's just the Whiskey Mariachi within the community to a lot of the original, which is really cool in a lot of ways. But
I remember him.
Yeah, it's it really allowed me. I've never grown as much as I have grown in terms of whiskey within the past few years as rapidly, as well as I've met some spectacular friendships that our friendships keep growing every day. I remember meeting Mitch. We had a few interactions before, but the grand opening, being able to spend time with him was really a great thing. He was a spectacular guy. Meeting you and your love for the Whiskey Mariachi is spectacular, and it's created a feeling of acceptance that I'm not used to, and so it's created this gratefulness and appreciativeness that I think is very special and magical in some ways.
And it's
a beautiful thing.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, Ray. Sorry about that. I was just saying that it's one of two things. I was going to say that community either created a section where people could feel relaxed in the environment or confident. I was gonna say it's kind of a combination of two that kind of wheelhouse into each other, where, like you were saying, I don't feel any qualms about putting on a hat and having some fun with the whiskey mariachi this afternoon. You know, like it was just some fun entertainment and it was a good time. But I was gonna say it also takes some confidence to do that, or to do some of the other things. So I was gonna say it's kind of like a double-edged sword when we're talking about that, of being relaxed, but also instilling some form of confidence in my mind.
Absolutely.
For Glen, that's what happened for Glen.
Yeah, I think within that, the whiskey vault community specifically, and the more I branch out from that, I think you find a lot of people that meet people where they are, not necessarily where you want them to be. And so that's a rare thing to find in a lot of communities. A lot of people, they want a rookie to be right where they're at. And so it creates this turbulence. Within the whiskey community, I find oftentimes you meet where you're at. If you find a beginner, you want to kind of take them under your wing and say, "Hey, come on, let's go down this journey a little bit more. I'll show you how to get, develop a little bit more." And it's really special that we can have that without being rude or just jerks. And there's always those little situations. But
well, I mean, sometimes being a rude and a jerk is being a friend, But
absolutely.
you usually know that when that happens. I just noticed, Brad, thanks for stopping in. We didn't see you over there, but I appreciate you stopping in. So good to see you again.
Absolutely.
It's always good to see a demigod along with a mariachi. And if we wait long enough, maybe we'll have a full Wettle.
There you go. Give him another drink. He needs another drink for that full character to come out.
Well,
Wettle? All right. I'm going to tell the story of how the full Wettle came into existence real quick. So
I'm glad to be here for this scoop.
So I was at level 1 whiskey sommelier school. And I collect stories is probably a great way of saying that. I love listening to stories, and once you tell them to me, I basically file them away for use in a future conversation. My entire family is that way. We just collect stories, and I've got stories from my grandparents, my father, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, all that sort of stuff. And one of the stories I told, I forget what got us onto that, was my father used to work at this veterinary clinic, and he was dating my mom at the time. And one of the not awesome things about working at the veterinary clinic was the vet also owned a storm. Or not a storm, oh my God, a farm. Wow, that was a weird slip right there. Also owned a farm. So he had to work on the farm sometimes. Fringe benefit, though, was he had horses on his farm, so he could go ride the horses whenever he wanted to. So one day, my dad was taking my mom on a date, and he decided to be super romantic and take her horseback riding. So they go to the farm. My dad saddles the horses up, and he's leading the first one out, trying to, convince my mom, like, no, this will be fun. It's not supposed to be terrifying at all. Pay no attention to the fact that the horse weighs 1,000 pounds and wants to cave your skull in with its hoof. And the horse reared up and tried to, of course, like hit him with his hoofs. My dad is pretty much my size, so he just had a hold of the, bit and bridle and just pulled down, and that will stop a horse pretty much instantly because of the way the bridle or the bit's in the mouth. It just hurts. So the horse immediately stopped kicking, brought its head down, stayed up for a sec. And then on its way down, my dad was like, you know what? I don't really appreciate this horse trying to kill me. So he just straight uppercuts the horse right in the nose. And, a horse is pretty big, so it just kind of stands there like, what just happened? Like, ugh. And Daniel was there, and he's like, your dad went full Mongo on that horse from Blazing Saddles. And I was like, well, not quite full Mongo. The horse didn't fall down. So he's like, oh, so he went full Wettle on the horse. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Full Wettle. And that's where full Wettle came from.
That's spectacular, man.
That's almost as, I think it's Boo Weekly who fought an orangutan at a county fair. That's right about on the same par as that is.
And so I'm called the Full Wettle because my dad once uppercut a horse. That's the short part of it.
I think it's
like
interesting.
We should have a talk with your dad.
I mean, I talk to my dad all the time.
See, for me, it's Fool Duran, because there's a story floating around about Roberto Duran, the famous boxer, that he got ticked off at a horse and knocked it out.
Yeah, my dad didn't do that. We're us spindly arm Wettles. We're not known for knocking horses out.
He definitely stung the horse, though. He didn't see that coming.
Yeah, I don't think. Not many people see an uppercut coming, much less a horse.
That's spectacular, man.
So I guess the story is basically why the Full Wettles stuck around.
That's beautiful.
It's a good story. I didn't know the full one. I was interpreting my own version of the story, which Glenn probably was going to put out there at some point. But it's good to have the facts.
That is great. And then, of course, your shenanigans has aided in facilitating the Full Wettle lore.
Well, I'm really big on giving the guys phallus-shaped gifts. And I guess they didn't want to say the word Mitch with them since it rhymes with something else. So I guess that's where the Full Wettle came from. But I mean, hey, it's one of those things. You are what you eat, and Rex can be a really big dick sometimes. So I just wanted to give him the opportunity to eat, according to his persona.
Well played there.
It is. I'm going to spin this around. And was there any one of them that stood out to either one of you as your favorite from this afternoon?
Yeah, the last one, the J. Henry and Son. That one was my favorite. Next to that, I'd have to say the Douglas Todd, and then the J. No, actually the Rieger, then the Douglas Todd, Driftless Glen, and then the Yahara Bay. But the J. Henry was phenomenal to me.
I think that.
I'm going to be pretty close to Raymond's. The J. Henry was my absolute favorite. And then between 2 and 4, I'm having trouble.
2 is Driftless Glen, just so you remember after my mini debacle there.
Yeah, it's number 2 is the Young Rye, which I don't know if I love the Young Rye as much as I am super enthused about the fact that it's a 14-month-old rye, and I enjoy it. So it's just rolling right on up my, scale of things.
Yes,
I'm so excited about the fact that they can put a 14-month-old rye out that tastes that good. But how about yourself, Mr. Karen?
Well, since I have been here and tasting these probably more than I should have, because there's not much left of this to taste with other people, but that's okay. I'm gonna go the same with everyone else. The J. Henry on this one takes it. It's a lot of flavors and it's really bold. I haven't had enough Texas whiskeys, and I doubt it's as rich in a couple of the flavors, but I thought it was a very good expression from Wisconsin, so I was really happy with that. And once again, I thought it was a 7-year, so it was kind of showing where a lot of people with this kind of 5-year age bracket where they kind of land at could be going to in the next 3 or 4 years. So I was like, okay, there could be, 15, 20 other companies out there that are going to start landing with something that's a little more complex, a little more exciting than what they had before. Then I'm going to go with number 4, which was the J. Rieger. I just like the unification of it. I like the flow of that one all the way through. It was a nice whiskey. I'm calling an everyday drinker, but I think I could probably handle it as that. It does get me excited. They have something called the Monaco from J. Henry, where it is actually aged in massive sherry oloroso butts, but that only comes out once a year. But I am excited about that one. Then after that, it kind of becomes a mix wash of things. I would probably go with the Driftless Glen next yet, just because, like you said, what excited me about that was it was only 14 months. Like, for being that young, I was like, that's pretty impressive. Just like you said, it wasn't as alcohol burny as you would expect at 58, 60% alcohol. I'm going to put Douglas and Todd next because it confused me the first time I had it, which sounds a little lame, but I had it, and I had a what the F moment, and I had to call Mitch. I was like, it has no rye, and I'm totally confused sitting here right now, and I don't know if this happens. Does it happen? So I'm going to put Yahara Bay last, but I'm not totally shitting on it because I think in this setup, it's the only one that was a little more basic compared to some of the other ones. But that's why I put it in there. I thought it was a nice, basic, entry-level bourbon where if you haven't had any before, it was friendly enough that you might come back again.
Yeah,
That's kind of the road I put in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and on that note, we're rolling up on an hour and a half of being on here, and I didn't even realize that. But due to a child getting up, I'm gonna have to probably start cutting out here. I'm surprised we got this long without me hearing something about it. So, Mitch, thanks for being on. I appreciate you coming on. A great
Thank you
deal.
for having me. Absolutely. It was a pleasure, Mr. Glen Caron.
And if you get a chance to talk again, you see that big shiny necklace with the big medallion. That means he is a whiskey 3-level sommelier, which there are not too many of them in the world. So we do appreciate you coming on and taking the time and imparting some of your knowledge that you have from the actual field itself. Much appreciate that. And then we have Raymond Michael Ramos, who was on, and we can't thank you enough. Especially with all the cigar and tobacco knowledge that you helped kind of put out there. I know I made a few texts a couple weeks ago when I was in a cigar lounge and wanted a little bit of help, and it turned out excellent. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. You're a good guy. You have a great show, and I'm honored to be here, and honored to be here with Mitch as well.
Excellent.
It's great being here with both of y'all, right?
Yes.
What's better than drinking with friends?
Absolutely.
Nothing. I just feel if we keep going on through 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, this may degrade a little bit. So, to everyone out there, thanks for stopping in. We can't appreciate it. Chad, thanks for moderating while we were doing what we were doing. And from my den to yours, remember, it's not the size of the den that matters. It's the love of the whiskey. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.